welcome to my show. And thank you for tuning in. And let me start off by saying to please like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button and share this with a friend or a family. Everybody needs to hear this message. Today, I'm going to talk about the power of pleasure. Now, I know that's not a common topic. Usually people don't get on the phone with their friends and talk about the power of pleasure. In fact, most people don't even know that pleasure has power. You don't hear this being preached on so much in the church. Yeah, pleasure may be talked about every now and again, but people do not ascribe pleasure and power to pleasure. But more importantly, not only am I going to talk about the power of pleasure, more to the point, I want to talk about the dark side of pleasure. So maybe this name would be the dark side of pleasure. We all know that pleasure is a good thing. I mean, if you're like me, you can sit up and if somebody asks you, where do you find pleasure? You can come up with at least 5 things in a minute. Most people can anyhow. I know for me, when I think about going to the beach, especially those white sandy beaches in the Panhandle, Destin, and Panama City, which is a place that I love to go to. They have those sugary white beaches. They're pristine, by the way. The water has a real greenish tint or hue to it, and it's just beautiful. And it's nice there, and it's not overcrowded, especially in Panama City. There's a pleasure that comes up, is a pleasurable thought that comes into my mind. And the same for a lot of other things. I can think about foods that bring me pleasure that I love to eat, even as a vegetarian actually. There's a lot of things that we all think about when it comes to pleasure. A lot of people, when you speak about pleasure, one of the things that most people think about is sex, because sex is pleasurable. Now, with that being said, today I want to examine the dark side of pleasure. Because just like there's good, there are things that you do that are good for you, make you happy, you enjoy, and they bring you pleasure. But there are also things that are not good for you, yet they bring you pleasure. And nobody really thinks about the part that pleasure plays in driving you or leading you down roads that you have no business being on. And I'm going to use some things that are real obvious, but there are a lot of things that are not obvious, like drugs. Anybody who is a drug addict, let's just say, most often they do it because of the pleasure, the pleasurable feeling that they get. I have spoken with people who are on drugs, on heroin, and they said that the feeling is out of this world. You know, they don't so much look at the addiction part of it, but pleasure, like I said, pleasure has a dark side, and it can lead you into areas that you don't want to go. Let's think about people who are promiscuous in sex. Now, we know there are a lot of reasons in the backdrop that make them take that road with promiscuity. Like no confidence, no self-esteem. It could be a plethora of things. However, most people who are very promiscuous are after the pleasure of it. Not thinking of all the things that, being promiscuity leads to or is bringing into their lives. Because there's a dark side to pleasure, but nobody wants to look at that. Because to be honest, when you want pleasure or you want to have something that's pleasurable, all you're thinking about is getting that something. You're thinking about how good this is going to taste, how good this is going to feel. That's what you think about. Yet, when you start to deal with things in your life that you have now are in bondage to, or you have strongholds, you got to look at one of the players in it is pleasure. Yeah, okay. Let's say you say I have an alcohol addiction. I have a friend that for years I was around him and he drank liquor. I drank with him, and this was years ago. I'm talking about in the early 90s, 90, 91 maybe. And he derived great pleasure out of drinking. And he kept telling me about how his uncle became an alcoholic and that he probably would end up like that. And he would get liquor and he'd just be throwing back shots of liquor. Today, he's an alcoholic. It took a long time to get there. But it got to the point where now he's falling down steps on the train station, the subway in New York City, because of the pleasure that led him to the place. It was one of the factors, is what I'm saying. So when you start looking at strongholds, if you got a stronghold where you are overeater, you're eating, like I said, when you start examining why you overeat, it can be that you had traumatic things that happened to you as to why you're doing it. But one of the factors is also the pleasure that comes along with it. So you got to deal with those. When you deal with those other factors, please don't forget to deal with pleasure. Pleasure is a stronghold. It can be a stronghold. Pleasure can be a monster, as you see, causing people to fall into things and continuously chase things that will hurt them or destroy them and their families. But pleasure can also be like a minstrel. Like, for instance, it can lead you to things of God because you derive pleasure on being in a relationship with God and pleasing Him. Those things, that is very pleasurable to me anyhow. I feel I get pleasure out of serving God. See? So, pleasure can be a good thing, as we stated earlier, but it has power. And that's the thing that I want you to focus on when you start looking at problem areas of your life. Because your flesh is one of the things that's one of the areas that your flesh dominates and utilizes in you and attracting you to things that whether you're supposed to have them or not, especially things you're not supposed to do. It's the pleasure. It uses pleasure to grab you and take hold of you because it wants to experience whatever it is that is not good for you. Again, like I said, and I got to keep stressing that. But your flesh wants you to, let's say your flesh wants you to go have sex with somebody, a married man. You got no business with a married man. But you say, well, I'm attracted to him, he's attracted to me, and I feel like this is going to be pleasurable things. You have conjured up all kinds of things in your images and thoughts in your mind on how pleasurable this is going to be. Your flesh is wanting you to do something that if you had a conversation with somebody that you shouldn't be doing it, but you're going to overlook that because your flesh wants you to do that for pleasure purposes. And it's more than that, actually. It wants you to go down a road that is going to create problems for you. There definitely is a dark side of pleasure. And I'm just giving you, I'm just scaling the surface. There is a lot more to talking about this. There's a lot of questions that this might bring, to mind in you, and you might be thinking, is this part of my problem in this area? If you're an overeater, if you're a person on drugs, or you doing things, overspending, the pleasure you get out of going and buying high price purses that you know that you really can't afford, because you should be paying for your rent or your mortgage. I mean, pleasure is such a trap sometimes. It sets a trap for you to fall in. Now, don't get me wrong. There are good pleasures out there, and I want you to enjoy them. But for anybody who is struggling in this area, where they know that they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and they're doing it because they want the pleasure, because it feels so good. I want to pray for you. I want you to, write down in that comments, what it is that you need prayer for. And I'm going to pray for you, because God sent me to talk to you about pleasure and the power of it. And to know that if you're struggling with something and it's a thing that makes you feel good, yeah, that means pleasure is part of that struggle. And when you start praying about, God, set me free from this, whatever it might be, you fill in the line, you need to say, God, set me free from the desire of, or the pleasure that this brings me. I don't want to focus on the pleasure. Set me free from the desire from wanting it. That's what you got to talk to God about. You've got to break this down to him. You got to show God you're serious about wanting to be free of whatever it is. I know many of you are talking to friends about things that you are caught up in or that you want out, bad relationships, really bad marriages. Yeah. And you know what? Talking to friends can be good if you talk to the right people. It gives you a way to get stuff out. But at the end of the day, and at the beginning of the day, you need to go to God first and say, God, I'm trapped. I'm in a stronghold. And I love to do this, God, because it feels so good, because the pleasure that it brings to me. But God, I need to be freed from this, because it is ruining my life in other areas. I'm in bondage. Deliver me from that thrill, that pleasure that is not good for me, God. I want to be free from the pleasure that is attached to this particular thing that I'm entrapped to. Yes, I want to be free from the thing too. And you pray that until you see it manifest. But you must believe that God has set you free. You got to believe. You take something to God in prayer. Don't get wishy-washy with it. You got to believe that God can and will do this for you. If you don't, you're not going to get it. I want to tell you of a scripture in the Bible. It's in 1 Timothy 5:6. And it talks about, and I'm not, I had my Bible here, but I don't know where it is right now. It really talks about a woman. It's talking about the widows, and you taking care of somebody who truly is a widow. But in this instance, this particular scripture, 1 Timothy 5, is talking about a woman who lives for pleasure. He says that woman is dead. If she's living for pleasure, don't live just for the chasing pleasurable things. We're supposed to be living for God. Now, you say, what do you mean by that? In other words, I'm not going to be focusing on, and I'm using the sex part because I know there are a lot of young ladies out there who, when you think about a guy, one of the first things you think about is having sex with him. Don't you know that that's exactly what that scripture is talking about? Isn't that guy more than just thinking about having sex with him? Your mind is in the wrong place. If you're looking for somebody, a possible mate, someone that could love you for who you are, and vice versa, then that's not the first thing you should have on your mind. Instead, you really need to be talking to God. God, get me ready for a mate, for a husband. Now, if you say, I don't want a husband, well then, that's a whole nother story. If this is about a booty call, as it's called, as you know what, no matter when you say a booty call, everybody know what that is. That is about pleasure. That is not about love. That is not about goodness. That is simply fleshly, carnal pleasure. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Running toward pleasure like that can be very destructive. And I'm telling you, it's going to create a problem in your life on many levels. And you know, most women who take that road end up having heartbreak. Because you know what, there's an old saying, when two lay down, one gets up with feelings. Sometimes both get up with feelings, but someone always ends up having feelings that the other one doesn't have, and that's another problem. But that's another discussion. We're going to talk about the pleasure right now. You know, so read 1 Timothy 5:6, and pray about that. Let that get down in your spirit. Ask God to lead you and to actually expose things to you that you're doing that derives a negative type of pleasure, because pleasure has a dark side, sweetie. It's important that we know that. It's important that we recognize that and look at those areas of our lives that we are struggling right now, and be real with ourselves. Don't tell yourself a lie. Don't tell yourself that, I know he's married and I love him and I'm going to end up with this man. In fact, I'm going to pray and ask God to give me this man because his wife is not being good to him. And I will. I prayed, I'm going to tell you that's a silly prayer. First of all, it's an ungodly prayer. It's unscriptural and it doesn't work. It's a fleshly prayer. You're praying that out of your flesh. You're playing that because you feel that you are better for him than his wife. It's a trap. The dark side of pleasure, that dark desire is leading you to all of these fictitious thoughts. And often they will not come true. They're going to hurt you, and I don't want you to be hurt. I want you to know, I want you to pray about these pleasures that are strongholds that make you keep returning to things that are hurting you, both mentally and sometimes physically. There are women who get pleasure out of a man beating them because they think that he loves them. Oh, he did that because he loved me. No, that's a lie. That's not love. Not someone beating you. You need to ask God to get you out of that relationship. Lord, deliver me from the thought that this would bring, that thought that this, and that brings pleasure to me to think that if he hit me, that he loves me. And then, he loves me. There's that thought, that pleasurable thought or feeling that he loves me. But he doesn't. There's a lot of women in the grave right now. And I don't want you to be one of you. If you or somebody listening to this, please ask me to pray for you. God has delivered me out of a lot of things. not physical abuse, but verbal, mental abuse. It's all abuse. I've been in relationships I had no business being in. And had I had the kind of relationship with God that I have now, I wouldn't have been in. Because I would have heard from God. Today, the reason why I have my husband is because God led me to him. I'll tell you that story one day. How it's a powerful story. It's a prophetic story. But until then, I'll pray for you. Just put your comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe and share this video. God bless you. Until next time, be safe and pray. Bye-bye.